candidate and the campaign.
And just moments ago, the president had this to say via Twitter. If anyone is looking for a good lawyer, I would strongly suggest that you don't retain the services of Michael Cohen.
Well, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Tom Dupree is here to dig into all of this. But we begin with senior correspondent Rick Leventhal with the very latest. Good morning, Rick.
And Eric, good morning. It was a stunning set of admissions in U.S. District Court in Lower Manhattan by a man who was once one of the president's most trusted employees. Michael Cohen admitted he lied, cheated, and paid women off, he says, to help his boss. Cohen, who walked out of the courthouse late yesterday free on $500,000 bond, pled guilty to hiding income from his taxicab business, hiding debt to secure a home equity loan, and arranging payments to two women in the run-up to the presidential election in coordination with and at the direction of a candidate for federal office to try and help him win.
Mr. Cohen disregarded that training, disregarded that tradition, and decided that he was above the law, and for that he was going to pay a very, very serious price.
Cohen admitted he paid $130,000 to Stephanie Clifford, better known by her porn name, Stormy Daniels, because she was ready to go public with a claimed affair with Mr. Trump that she said happened a decade earlier. And Cohen arranged to reimburse a tabloid for burying a story about former Playboy model Karen McDougal, who also claimed an affair with Mr. Trump. Cohen's lawyer says the president should be worried.
Yes, he committed a crime. He should be indicted. If he were not president, he clearly would be indicted and jailed for that crime. Whether he can be indicted as president, of course, is not yet decided.
Well, nothing in Cohen's plea deal requires him to cooperate with any investigation of the president, but it doesn't preclude him from doing it either, Eric.
So, Rick, meanwhile, the president's tweeting on this, we just said a few moments ago. What else are you hearing from the White House on the stunning developments?
Yeah, it was a pretty remarkable tweet, and we got a statement last night from the president's new personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, who said, quote, "There is no allegation of any wrongdoing against the president and the government's charges against Mr. Cohen." Cohen, by the way, will be sentenced December 12th, or there's already a deal in place to cut his max from 65 years to somewhere between 3 to 5 years in federal prison. Eric?
I will be covering these developments all through the next 2 hours. Rick, thank you. Sandra?
Keeping track of it all. Meanwhile, a jury finding Paul Manafort guilty on 8 counts, including tax and bank fraud. President Trump arguing his former campaign chair is being treated unfairly.
I feel very badly for Paul Manafort. Again, he worked for Bob Dole, he worked for Ronald Reagan, he worked for many, many people. And this is the way it ends up. And it was not the original mission, believe me. It was something very much different. So, had nothing to do with Russian collusion. We continue the witch hunt.
Let's bring in Tom Dupree, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush. Tom, what a morning, what a night, what an afternoon. The news keeps coming in. Paul Manafort, what are the implications of the outcome of this trial on the Mueller investigation and President Trump?
Absolutely. And what an afternoon that was yesterday. Developments occurring every hour on the hour, it seemed. As far as Manafort's significance, I think there are a few things to take away here. The first is that, look, this trial did not concern any of the work that Manafort did in his role as campaign chairman for President Trump. The president is right that this didn't involve the collusion allegations. This didn't involve any work that Manafort did for the campaign for President Trump. So President Trump is not directly implicated by yesterday's verdict. I think at the most, it just calls into question the decision to have Paul Manafort serve as the campaign chairman. I do think that it does tee up the question, and the president himself has implied that there's at least a possibility of a pardon on the table for Manafort. The president has made no secret that he thinks that this is not quite a fair prosecution, but I think it remains to be seen whether the president feels so strongly about this that he would take what, in my view, would be a fairly extraordinary step of pardoning Paul Manafort.
Does this put more pressure on other players in the Russia investigation as this is seen as a victory for Robert Mueller?
I think it could. In other words, it shows that Mueller is not afraid to take these cases to trial. It shows that Mueller's team is capable of obtaining convictions, and convictions for charges that potentially carry very serious jail time. But look, I mean, anyone who's followed Bob Mueller and who's familiar with the folks on the Mueller team, I mean, this is the varsity. I mean, these are very serious prosecutors, and they are taking their mission seriously. And I think anyone who would underestimate that, I think would be running a risk.
All of this came in just minutes after Michael Cohen pled guilty in federal court, Tom, and hearing last night from his attorney, Lanny Davis, who, by the way, is coming up at the top of the next hour here on America's Newsroom, said his client, Cohen, more than happy to talk to Mueller, tell all that he knows. Where ultimately does this go, and what does this mean for the president?
There certainly is no love lost at this point between the president and his former lawyer. We saw the president tweeting this morning about, get a different lawyer than Cohen if you want a good one.
Why don't we throw that back up there? Because that has been the sole tweet of the president this morning. If anyone is looking for a good lawyer, I would strongly suggest that you don't retain the services of Michael Cohen. Surely at least some could get a laugh out of that.
Well, that is for sure. And look, I think it's fair to say a pardon may not be in the cards for Michael Cohen. As far as the significance goes, look, I think from my perspective, the big question here is whether Cohen has evidence that will support his allegation that he did what he did at the specific direction and with the knowledge and cooperation of the president. If this turns out to be a he said, she said sort of thing where it's Cohen's words against the president, that's a much different case than if Cohen actually had recordings of the president concerning these specific payments that somehow inculpated the president. So I think that remains to be seen. There's no doubt in my mind that Cohen is cooperating with Mueller, and that if Cohen can help Mueller in this regard, he will.
Got to ask you finally about Michael Flynn. This hearing is now delayed till September 17th. How do you sort of connect the dots here?
It is intriguing. This is one of these dates that keeps getting pushed back. And I think what it tells you is that Michael Flynn is still in play. In other words, he is still being relied upon or used in some sense by the special counsel. And I think it shows that there's a lot of interconnection here. Look, we don't know what cards Mueller is ultimately going to play. He has been gathering evidence, talking to witnesses, building cases, getting cooperation from people. And at some date in the future, hopefully the not too distant future, Mueller will put his cards on the table, and we'll see how Flynn connects into the much larger picture.
Tom Dupree kicking things off for us here this morning. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
And we have a fantastic lineup today on America's Newsroom coming up on all of this. Today's headliner is going to be Michael Cohen's attorney, Lanny Davis. He will join us live in his first interview on Fox News Channel since becoming Mr. Cohen's attorney. But first, going to be talking to former Trump campaign advisor Michael Caputo. Michael's known Michael Cohen for years, and he's known Paul Manafort for even longer. We'll get his views on the stunning developments yesterday. And later on, law professor Jonathan Turley on the impacts of the convictions and what we can expect next as it affects President Trump. But meanwhile, we're covering the other big story today. Police say it was that illegal immigrant confessing to the murder of Molly Tibbetts. That suspect making his first court appearance a few hours from now. Investigators say Christian Rivera led them to the body of that missing college student in Iowa. Rivera also reportedly told police that he followed her in his car while she was out for a jog, and she threatened to call the police. Investigators say it was home surveillance video that helped them crack this case.
We have confirmed with Homeland Security investigations that he is an illegal alien, and we believe he has been in this area now for 4 to 7 years. We're able to track his pattern and the routes in which he took. We're also able to find Molly running on this video, and we're able to determine that he was one of the last ones to have seen Molly running.
Matt Finn is live in Montezuma, Iowa, with this heartbreaking ending and why Rivera was in this country in the first place and not booted out. Matt?
Eric, 24-year-old Christian Rivera is expected to appear at Poweshiek County Court charged with first-degree murder in the death of Molly Tibbetts. Police say that Rivera confessed that on July 18th, the day that Molly Tibbetts disappeared, he followed her on her jog, and she became frightened and got out her cell phone and said, "Get away from me, I'm going to call police." And at that point, he blacked out and says he doesn't remember what happened next, but that Molly Tibbetts ended up in his trunk with the bloody skull. Ultimately, police tracked down Rivera, and he led them to Tibbetts' body that he says he hid in a cornfield. ICE now says Rivera is from Mexico, and they have placed a detainer request on him here in this county. We've also learned Rivera worked at a farm just a few miles from where Molly vanished. Yarrowby Farms released a statement saying Rivera was an employee in good standing and that he somehow passed the government's E-Verify employment system despite his status as an undocumented worker. The Des Moines Register newspaper reports it has reviewed documents that list several owners of that farm, and the owners might be relatives of Craig Lang, who reportedly was a former Republican candidate for Iowa's agriculture secretary. Molly's mother was with her two sons, Molly's younger brothers, at the press conference where police announced her daughter's death. She remained stoic and quiet as she has throughout this entire ordeal. Molly's dad, Rob Tibbetts, lives in California. He spent a full month on the ground here in Iowa pleading for information and doing every interview he could because he said he wanted to keep his daughter's name out on people's minds. Authorities eventually advised him to get back to a normal routine in California. He returned to California just a few days ago, only to receive the bad news. And Molly was expected to return to the University of Iowa as a sophomore, and there is a vigil there tonight. Eric.
Just absolutely horrible. All right, Matt, thank you. Sandra.
Meanwhile, President Trump bringing up the murder of Molly Tibbetts at a rally in West Virginia last night.
You heard about today with the illegal alien coming in, very sadly, from Mexico, and you saw what happened to that incredible, beautiful young woman. Should have never happened. The laws are so bad. The immigration laws are such a disgrace. We're getting them changed, but we have to get more Republicans. We have to get.
Vice President Pence, who met with the Tibbetts family, remember, during the search for Molly, tweeting this: "We commend the swift action by local, state, and federal investigators working in Iowa in apprehending an illegal immigrant who is now charged with first-degree murder. Now justice will be served. We will never forget Molly Tibbetts."
And there is another big story to tell you about today. President Trump wrapping up his push for the midterms, stumping for Republican Senate candidate Patrick Morrisey in West Virginia last night. In Morrisey's race to unseat Democratic Senator Joe Manchin in November. And up next, Attorney General Morrisey joins us live. There he is to talk about last night's rally and the race. Trump held a rally last night in West Virginia. He stumped for Republican Senate candidate Patrick Morrisey, the state's attorney general who is trying to unseat Democratic Senator Joe Manchin in the midterms.
This November, voters in West Virginia will face a very simple choice. A vote for Patrick Morrisey is truly a vote to make America great again.
Joe Manchin no longer has West Virginia values, period. When I get to the U.S. Senate, I'm going to be a strong ally of President Trump. We're all going to help this guy make sure not only that we make West Virginia great again, we continue to make West Virginia great again. Best way to do that? Liberal Joe's got to go.
Well, Attorney General Patrick Morrisey joins us now from West Virginia. Mr. Attorney General, what do you mean that Joe Manchin doesn't have West Virginia values? He's leading you by 7 points in the polls, and he's been pretty close to President Trump.
Well, I think most people in West Virginia are really beginning to see that Joe Manchin sold them out when things mattered most. When you support Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, radical gun control, when you oppose the Trump tax cuts, and you don't try to really fix Obamacare, these devastating premium increases, then you don't have West Virginia values. And that's Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin went to Washington. He lost his way. I think as more people learn about my strong conservative record of accomplishment, taking out the Obama power plan, changing the whole national drug quota system, in part through our lawsuit, and doing so many good things that help our state produce jobs, I think people know this is a very clear contrast, and they don't want a dishonest liberal in Joe Manchin. They want a conservative fighter in Patrick Morrisey.
Yeah, some folks in your state wouldn't call him dishonest. They wouldn't call him a liberal. Here's a tweet that he says about you.
Yeah.
He says, Morrisey, West Virginia will have to answer to 800,000 West Virginians for trying to take their health insurance coverage away. Insurance companies could deny coverage to people with pre-existing conditions like diabetes and high blood pressure if Pat has his way. So what is your answer to that, especially in coal country, where, our great coal miners can face serious health problems?
Well, I think this is another example of how Joe Manchin's being dishonest. These are scare tactics. There's no difference between the candidates on helping those who need it most, those with pre-existing conditions, those with catastrophic expenses. Joe Manchin has a terrible liberal record, and that's why he has to make things up about my very strong record. Look, we have to get rid of Obamacare, these spiraling out of control premium increases that are hurting West Virginia families. And so we're focused on that. But Joe Manchin wants to divert attention in a topic where there's no difference between the candidates. Let's focus on getting rid of Obamacare's ridiculous premium increases. We got rid of the mandate in the tax bill that Joe Manchin voted against. And it's time that we make changes to help hardworking men and women in West Virginia, give them the kind of health care choices that they deserve.
And finally, you're an attorney general, chief law enforcement officer of your state. What's the reaction to your state and the voters with the Cohen and the Cohen plea and the Manafort conviction? And the fact that prosecutors say that the president, according to Michael Cohen, okayed a secret payment, hush money, to try and influence the presidential election, which would be a felony.
Look, as a prosecutor, I have to take and look at all these facts. But one thing I can see already, and I think even the Mueller probe proved, that there was no collusion. And so this has been a witch hunt for a long period of time.
About this specific
and
charge?
I think no one's directly implicated. No one has directly implicated the president.
That Cohen claims. Well, Michael Cohen did yesterday by claiming that the president had directed him to make that illegal payment. Quickly.
Look, I can't speak to the motivations behind someone who may have multiple charges against him, is trying to cut a deal. But I can tell you this. So far, no one has directly implicated the president. And this president has had great policies for West Virginia. Good judges, upholding the rule of law, taking away these burdensome regulations, helping out coal. We've also worked with them to go after the opiate
We're up against the computer, and there's nothing we can do about the computer. And Michael Cohen did implicate the president, so said his attorney, Lanny Davis, in the plea yesterday. Mr. Morrissey, thank you for joining us.
Charges, sir. Charges, not facts.
All right, more on all this coming up. Republicans are also, by the way, looking to flip a Florida Senate seat from blue to red. Current Governor Rick Scott is looking to take Democrat Bill Nelson's place in the Senate. Scott joins us in the next hour to talk about his Senate bid and his wife indicted for spending thousands of dollars in campaign funds for personal expenses. According to the indictment, the couple pocketed $250,000 for luxury vacations, medical bills, theater tickets, and even fast food purchases. House Speaker Paul Ryan says Congressman Hunter will be removed from all committee assignments pending resolution of the case.
She was found in a cornfield, and there were corn stalks placed over the top of her. We have confirmed with Homeland Security investigations that he is an illegal alien, and we believe he has been in this area now for 4 to 7 years.
That's Special Agent Rick Wan in Iowa on the tragic end of the search for Molly Tibbetts. You know, an illegal immigrant confessing, police say, to the murder of the 20-year-old college student. The suspect will be making his first appearance in court in just a few hours from now. Joanna Spilborn joins us, a criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor. This is, Joanna, so heartbreaking and terrible that this illegal alien, who's been here for several years, has been charged in this horrendous murder. If he wasn't in this country illegally, Molly Tibbetts apparently would be alive.
Would still be alive today. You can't help but compare this case to the Kate Steinle case. This is Kate Steinle 2.0. And if we had a wall, Molly Tibbetts would be going to college in a couple of weeks, as she should be. It's heartbreaking.
Well, even, I'm not just a wall, but I mean, if actual laws were enforced, then perhaps that would be the case. The difference, though, between Kate Steinle and this is this suspect has confessed as opposed to going to trial.
Fortunately, right. So we will not have an opportunity to have 12 people get it wrong like they did in the Kate Steinle case, because they were picked from a pool in a sanctuary city. Here we have a confession, and unless he redacts it or retracts it, it looks like there won't be a trial here. Eric, one of the things that is really disturbing about this case, though, is that his employer is saying he passed the background check.
The E-Verify.
They did a background check and he passed it. That begs the question to me, how easy is it to beat the system? How easy is it to fake the documents necessary that go into the E-Verify system? That needs to be looked at.
He works for an agriculture company, a farm in Iowa, and he's been employed there for several years. And they say they do check all their employees, that they go through the E-Verify system. Can you explain what that is? And was this a loophole? Was this not caught? Or, as you point out, perhaps fake documents?
Maybe we have a bigger problem, right? The E-Verify system is actually very simple. When you employ somebody, they fill out certain information, which includes their legal documentation, their social security number, et cetera, and any information from Homeland Security. You take that information as an employer and you plug it into the E-Verify system, and in 3 or 5 seconds, it tells you whether that person is legally able to work in this country. According to this employer, now I don't know if we verified whether the employer's being honest here, but according to the employer, he passed that, which means, did he have somebody else's identification? Did he pretend to be somebody else? Or do we have a bigger hole where these documents are so easy to fake that anybody can beat the system?
That'll all be part of the investigation. Finally, what do you think suspect will happen to Rivera?
So there's no death penalty in Iowa. Since we have a confession, I'm expecting that he will spend the rest of his life in prison here. It makes no sense to deport him because he'll just come back again, and we don't want to have another opportunity to kill an innocent person. He'll spend the rest of his life behind bars.
All right, Jonathan, thank you so much.
Eric, thank you.
Of course. Sandra?
We are now moments away from a big milestone on Wall Street, the longest ever bull market in U.S. stock market history. How we got here and what it means for your bottom line.
And Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, well, he's making the rounds again on Capitol Hill ahead of his confirmation hearings. So how did a meeting with a critical swing vote? Susan Collins of Maine there on the left. How did that go yesterday?
I have always waited until after the Judiciary Committee hearings before rendering a final decision on a Supreme Court nominee. You never know what questions are going to come up.
Right over to our studio, because this is a major milestone for this market, and it has shown resilience, Maria, to show this kind of run-up.
And I think that's really the key, the resilience of it, because this rally that we've seen in stock prices is based on real fundamentals. It's based on earnings growth, economic growth. You know, for a time, it was based on the Federal Reserve and cheap money, because you know that the Federal Reserve basically went to zero on interest rates after the financial crisis. It was all on the Fed to take us out of that financial crisis in 2007. But it did. Rates were low. It helped things come back. And then it was all about the corporate sector and earnings. When you look at the earnings story, they are strong. 26% profit growth in the first quarter, 20% profit growth in the second quarter, really strong. And so that's why I think, yes, it's 9.5 years, but it's probably going to continue for several more years because the fundamental backdrop is there.
Some of the write-ups this morning were fun to look at. The bull market turns 3,453 days old today. So, by the way, when you're looking at the Dow and you just saw it's kind of like, you know, sharply unchanged, as I like to say today, it's kind of hovering around the unchanged mark there. What we're talking about here is these are gains that have sustained over a period without ever dipping into a bear market, which is when the stock market falls 20% from its most recent highs. That has never happened. It's fallen into correction mode where it sells off more than 10%, right, Maria?
That's right.
So the big question is, who gets the credit for this? Because this has been going on for, as you said, over 9 years now.
Well, certainly the recovery began under President Obama, no doubt about it. But when President Trump came in and started rolling back regulations, that was really critical because the president rolled back regulations and basically unleashed animal spirits in business once again. So that was a big part of this as well. But certainly the recovery started under President Obama, and the Federal Reserve should get much of the credit, in my opinion, because the Fed had easy money for so many years. Now you also are looking at an earnings picture that is strong because of rollback in regulations and lower taxes. There's no doubt about it that the earnings period that we saw this year and at the end of last year that was so strong was largely due to the tax cuts and an inability on the part of corporate America to start spending that money that they had been sitting on. They were sitting on cash for 10 years, Sandra. You know that.
Remember, that was the everyday conversation. These companies are not spending that money.
Now they're putting money into IT and R&D, and this is very positive.
The one thing Charles Payne tells us a lot when he comes on the program, you know, know he's been a big fan of this bull market for a long time. He doesn't see this going away anytime soon.
I agree with him.
And that's the big question, is how much longer does this last? But he always notes that, unfortunately, the individual investor, many of them, most of them, missed out on this rally.
Yeah.
They were living in fear because of the last financial crisis and the biggest recession since the Great Depression. There was fear that left people out of this market. So if people are seeing this now, should they be getting in? Does this last?
Well, look, I think you really have to look at this market over the long term. I mean, you really don't want to look at the market on a day-to-day basis, even on a week-to-week basis. That's why it's really important to analyze this rally over a 9.5-year period, because that's long term. And if you're putting money into the stock market today, you really want to have a feeling that you don't need it in 2 weeks. You don't need that money in a year. You don't need that money in 3 years. This is long term. So I would have to say, agree with Charles, you put money into the market and you wait. And that's the same thing with your 401k. You put money in your 401k and you leave it alone. You wait for a long term. That's how you get real returns. And I would also add this. There's no other asset class that will create as much wealth as the stock market will.
Fair enough. A final point. What is, if anything, that keeps the market bulls up at night? What do they fear could derail this rally?
Right now, it's the Fed as well as tariffs. So the Federal Reserve has been raising interest rates. There is a fear that the Fed will blow it, overdo it, too many rate hikes and really slow things down. You know, the president has been complaining about the Federal Reserve inserting interest rate hikes in the middle of this. And then, of course, we've got the policy on tariffs. If, in fact, we see companies raising prices, creating inflation, that would be an issue as well. I don't see that happening. I still think this president is in negotiation mode when it comes to these tariffs, but we'll see. That's certainly out there at a fear.
Fascinating stuff. Today marks the day, the longest bull market run in U.S. stock market history.
Sure
Maria
does.
Bartiromo, you can see her 6 to 9 a.m. live every morning on the Fox Business Network. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sandra.
All right, Eric?
All right, thanks, Sandra and Maria. Well, meanwhile, Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, he's set to appear at his confirmation hearings in just about 2 weeks. Yesterday, he met with lawmakers, including Republican Maine Senator Susan Collins. You know, she is seen as a key swing vote in the Senate. And the senator sounded positive about Kavanaugh's confirmation after they met.
We talked about whether he considered Roe to be settled law. He said that he agreed with what Justice Roberts said at his nomination hearing, in which he said that it was settled law. We had a very good, thorough discussion about that issue and many others.
But meanwhile, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer suggested Kavanaugh failed to offer assurances that abortion rights would not be overturned if he is confirmed to the high court.
I understand that the judge told other members today that he considered Roe v. Wade settled law. He did not say that to me. Conservative justices have a habit of saying something is settled law during their confirmation and then overturning it the minute they get on the bench.
Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings are set to begin right after Labor Day on September 4th. Sandra?
Facebook removing more than 650 suspicious pages and accounts. A closer look at their connections to Russia and Iran. More on that in our next hour. Plus, Eric.
And we have some brand new reaction this morning coming from President Trump right on the heels of the news of Michael Cohen's plea deal. He's accusing his former attorney of, quote, making up stories. And now the president's most vocal critics all lining up to slam Mr. Cohen. Will get a reaction straight ahead. And former campaign manager or advisor for Mr. Trump, Michael Cohen, who was there. He has known both Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort. Michael Caputo is with us. Mr. Caputo will be here in a minute for his take on both developments that stunned the nation yesterday.
He should be indicted. If he were not president, he clearly would be indicted and jailed for that crime. Whether he can be indicted.
Heading to Rockport, Texas later today. It's going to mark 1 year since Hurricane Harvey. He first visited Rockport just days after the devastating storm slammed into the Texas coast. That happened, as you recall, last August. It destroyed so many homes and businesses there. Well, the vice president will meet with disaster relief volunteers, and then he will, of course, make some remarks.
Where is the collusion? You know, they're still looking for collusion. Where is the collusion? Find some collusion. We want to find the collusion.
President Trump slamming the special counsel last night following back-to-back convictions of the two former top aides. And moments ago, President Trump tweeting his defense of Paul Manafort while slamming his former attorney for, quote, making up stories. Here's what he had to say. I feel very badly for Paul Manafort and his wonderful family. Justice took a 12-year-old tax case, among other things, applied tremendous pressure on him, and unlike Michael Cohen, he refused to make up stories in order to get a deal. Such respect for a brave man. Joining me now, former Trump campaign advisor Michael Caputo.
Happened yesterday. It's very interesting how just in February, Michael Cohen was saying for all the world to hear that this was not a campaign contribution or campaign expenditure, that it was on the up and up. And as soon as he got jammed up in crimes that had nothing at all to do with the president, he seems to have changed his tune, and I'm pretty sure that was non-negotiable.
Well, the president's critics are using all of this as an opportunity to slam him further. Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, wrote this in a tweet. Today, your personal attorney confessed under oath to committing federal crimes at your direction. You may be a slick salesman, but not even you can divert from that. New York has had your number from the beginning, and now the rest of the world does too. What do you think when you see a tweet like that?
Well, I think many of us really kind of sometimes lose our mind on Twitter, and the governor of New York did that right there. I mean, the irony's not lost on me that Governor Andrew Cuomo's own right-hand man fixer, just like Michael Cohen, Joe Percoco, is going to jail for high crimes and misdemeanors himself. A lot of corruption right there in the governor's office. So the fact that he didn't have the self-awareness to know that he was touching a third rail that already had his fingerprints on it, I think that's hilarious. I think a lot of these leftist elected officials will not be able to resist making these kinds of cracks. But for Andrew Cuomo to touch that, I think that's really shows a lack of self-awareness on the governor's part. He's in a re-election right now where corruption is key, and his opponent is making it the #1 issue, and the people of New York know it.
I want to show you this tweet. Michael Avenatti, of course, the attorney for the adult film star Stormy Daniels. He jumped in as well, and he tweeted this at the president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, saying, "Buckle up, Buttercup. You and your client completely misplayed this." What is he trying to say?
He's trying to say that someone should take away my Twitter. I got to tell you, I'm guilty. Like I said before, I'm guilty of this now and again as well. But for a public official, for example, congressman to quote, to tweet people and say something that a teenager would say, and Avenatti, who seems to have inserted himself through the pornography industry into the minds of Americans on the news. I think these are ridiculous statements. It's kind of like a schoolyard taunt. I guess Twitter is taunting, and that's where we are today. I don't think it's very serious, and Avenatti is someone I don't take very seriously.
The president suggesting Michael Cohen is making up stories. You have just said you've known him personally for years, about 5 years, as we understand it. Do you think he is?
Well, I think it's entirely possible that Michael Cohen will make up a story to try to get some leniency for crimes that he's committed that it didn't involve Donald Trump at all. I believe that's what's happened here. They say he's not cooperating, but if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. This is cooperation in its finest form. I think that when it comes down to the Department of Justice, we know they do things like you can get a reduced sentence if you plead guilty to this here, and they put their finger on the campaign finance violation and implicate the president. I'm sure that was non-negotiable when he got a better deal for the crimes that he committed, and I'm sure he'll get more leniency in the future if he tells more lies.
Well, Lanny Davis, Cohen's attorney, is about to come up, first time on Fox since becoming his attorney. We will hear from him in moments. He has suggested that his client's knowledge, that his client has knowledge implicating the president in criminal conspiracy to hack Democratic emails. He has had a lot to say. He went on the Today Show this morning as well. Again, we'll talk to him in a few minutes, but wanted to get your reaction to that.
Well, Lanny Davis comes from the Clinton team, and when people tell me that he's working on orders of Clinton Incorporated, I think that's kind of funny because Lanny doesn't need any orders to go out and act like a highly partisan Democrat. He comes by it honestly. He is one. And when he's going to be right in his wheelhouse for the next several days. He's very good at the communications aspect of litigation. But I got to tell you, I am really entertained by the fact all these reporters who are out there who have for 2 years told me that Michael Cohen is the most unreliable source on the planet are now acting like he's some paragon of virtue. Mr. Davis may be able to spin out the idea that Michael Cohen is looking for whatever.
Well, the president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, has said there is no allegation of any wrongdoing against the president and the government's charges against Mr. Cohen. It's clear that, as the prosecutor noted, Mr. Cohen's actions reflect a pattern of lies and dishonesty over a significant period of time. We are going to hear a lot more on this. Michael Caputo, we thank you for your time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And as Sandra just mentioned, we will in a few moments be hearing from the other side. Might roll out of some new facial recognition technology, some major airports across the country, hoping the new system will cut down on wait times, and boy, do we need that, and increase security. Claudia Cowan joins us now from one of the first airports to use this new technology. She's at San Jose, California. Hi, Claudia.
Hi, Eric. That's right. Biometric facial recognition looks to be a game changer. It is in use here in San Jose and a dozen other airports, speeding things up for passengers, boosting security, but also raising some privacy concerns. Whether it's going through customs or boarding some international flights, your face is your boarding pass and ID. In a pilot program at LAX, cameras use biometric facial recognition to match passengers' unique features to government pictures already on file, from passports or visas.
The algorithms are so sophisticated that they're able to determine matches over 99% of the time in our testing.
Most passengers were impressed.
It's quick. I just was afraid maybe it wouldn't recognize me, but it did, so I'm going to London.
As far as getting through, I like it.
So far, it seems these e-gates do make it easier for people to board and get to their seats and settle in for their long international flight. But some critics argue people may be sacrificing privacy for convenience.
My concerns are that this technology will be used beyond its current scope. I worry that facial recognition will migrate from airports all across federal law enforcement, putting the privacy of law-abiding Americans at risk.
But Customs and Border Protection maintains the software is secure, and along with facial scans of those who enter the U.S. at Customs, will generate a biometric record of exit, a border security measure mandated by Congress in 2004. Now, passengers who feel that these e-gates might be a little too much like Big Brother can opt out and board the traditional way, but Customs and Border Protection says this biometric boarding is the future and hope to roll out this kind of technology to all airports in the U.S. within the next 4 years. Eric?
All right, Claudia, anything to cut down those lines? Thank you. Sandra?
Well, it is a very busy morning here.